Good morning. When I see our foreign minister trying to lecture Mexico and USA over their labor laws, as was seen during the NAFTA discussions, I turn myself into an imaginative screenwriter and then I pretend that I am the French trade negotiator and negotiating with Madame Freeland and a team who are representing Canada. So I open the discussions like that. Bonjour, Madame Freeland. As you may know, we in France have something called Le Code du Travail. It's a progressive, unique, historic document which we are proud of. Our code is 3,300 pages long. 170 pages are devoted to rules governing termination of employment. This section deals with health and security in more than 500 pages. It's a complex, and employees have often to hire experts to properly understand it. We have 34-hour week long, very strict regulations regarding workers so that they don't work very hard and they don't work too long. We are proud to say we have minimum wage, much higher than exists in your country. We are closer to the level in the USA, which we consider as a form of indentured labor, like the bonded labor in India. We make it impossible to fire a worker. In fact, you might be interested to know that under our law, financial difficulty or declining revenue is not a justification for throwing out workers. The employer must get permission from authorities before doing that. And it is not uncommon in our country for an employee's tax rolls to exceed the employer's salary. So does Canada have such a labor code? This gives your companies in Canada an unfair advantage on the French companies because our companies behave responsibly, which you don't. So we demand in matter of social justice and basic human rights that any trade treaty with Canada carries an obligation to create a system in Canada similar to ours. Imagine it. And this is what exactly Canadian Foreign Minister does during the negotiations. I am sure French never made such a declamation the way I have done. They won't do it, they're very diplomatic. But it was meant to show you how your blood will boil if somebody who's negotiating with you behaves in those terms. And as I said earlier, this is exactly what Canada is doing when negotiating with Mexico and NAFTA. France has no business lecturing us how we conduct our business. The same way, we have no business lecturing USA and Mexico. And yet we do. Canada, during these negotiations, told US government to prohibit the right to work. Now, in US, in many states, almost 50 states, there's 25 total, there's a right to work, which is a very good right, as a matter of fact, because you are assured employment. And Canada also wants USA and Mexico to toughen up environmental regulations. It also wants them to deal with indigenous and gender rights, that in case a company employs 500 workers, 250 must be women. It's basically incoherent. Right to work might be a dubious label. It is possible that in the right to work, workers don't pay the union dues and thereby cripple the union. So what's wrong with that? But Canada, especially the Liberal government and the NDP government, believe that the unions must be strengthened because they are their vote bank. And they are also their funders. So what the workers contribute to the unions, unions in turn give to the Liberal and the NDP party, and maybe even to Conservative. But then the biggest getter is Liberal. We knew it when Kathleen got millions of dollars from teachers' union. In that sense, that may not be acceptable to Canada, but then Canada has no right, as they don't have a right to tell Canada to strengthen the unions. So, in the absence of a collective agreement, a worker can be fired anytime. So, but then Canada believes that the people have a right to work for less. It's better to get less pay than to be unemployed. And it does give American companies an edge over Canadian companies, because here the laws are meant to protect workers. As a matter of fact, Canada is workers' paradise. Now, American workers' right to work gets pretty weird by Canadian standards. Imagine in 2012 there was a case in Iowa when a dentist fired his assistant. And the dentist was fired because she was very attractive. And the dentist said that when he looked at her, he had sexual fantasies of having sex with her. And also he said that this condition of his was creating a problem with his wife. A very human condition. So the best thing was to get out of that relationship and fire the dental assistant. But imagine such a situation happening in Canada. The dental assistant would not only get her job back, but she will get damages for harassment. Looking pretty is not a crime. And according to the Canadian system, her human rights would be violated and she might get $1 million or more, depending on the judge's attitude and demeanor. This may not be possible in USA. Mexico is another story. It is more corrupt, and the trade unions often work effectively, owned and operated by the employer. They are not independent. They are the bondsmen of women of the employers. So, the collective agreements have no meaning whatsoever. Basically, they are the spokesperson of the employer. So that again gives them an edge over the Canadian companies. But then this is a competitive age. Now coming to the other part of lecturing of Canada, that's on environmental standards. Why does Foreign Minister Freeland forget our tar sands? Sorry, they call it oil sands. One of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases on the planet. And then they talk of the gender rights. Where were the gender rights when Canada sold billions of dollars worth of arms to Saudi Arabia, where women are not only pets, but slaves? And I couldn't control my laughter when I saw Madam Freeland and her accompanied cronies started talking about the indigenous rights. I've been led to believe that the indigenous communities in USA are wealthy and that they are also some dirt poor. Quite possible. But here, only the leaders of the indigenous communities are rich, and the condition of the indigenous people is pitiable, is deplorable. And then, we are calling them to uphold the gender rights when we violate the gender rights while exporting to countries like Saudi Arabia. They want them to uphold indigenous rights when we exploit indigenous people shamelessly. This is a typical case of pot calling the kettle black. Now imagine our virtue, that Americans and Mexicans is nothing but a feel-good political statement. They are not meant to impact NAFTA. And in fact, they might be impediment to the acceptance of NAFTA. You don't want a preacher at that time. It's an economic business and the business sense which is important when making a trade deal. We here in Canada have the high wall of taxation and regulations to shield Canadian retailers. We protect them. We protect our dairy industry. We protect our poultry industry. We protect our lumber industry. And then we tell them not to protect their industry. How is that possible? Why this contradiction? Because we need an intact trade deal. Millions of jobs depend on that. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has admitted that in case Donald Trump decides to cancel NAFTA, he doesn't have a plan B. The short-sighted approach of the Prime Minister and his cabinet makes them indulge in histrionics, typical moral preaching, with an effort to divert the attention of the people here in Canada. The negotiators representing Mexico, the negotiator representing USA are hard-headed businessmen and economists. They are not taken in by this poised, meaningless talk, which is in fact a cover for hypocrisy that we represent in this country. The labor laws and other issues raised by Canada are a part of the social compact that vary from country to country, from one democracy to another democracy. They have their system, we have ours. But here, when we are negotiating for NAFTA or for any other deal, it is basic law issue, basic trade issue, basic business issue. Let's do business. Papa, don't preach. Somebody has to tell that to Justin Trudeau so that he pulls up Mr. Freeland and tells her, Mummy, don't preach. Time is up for preaching. These moral platitudes might look well with hypocrites. They might have resonate with the people who cannot understand the economic realities. But the countries hard-headed to negotiate, but the countries that are basically on a road to economic success don't need these platitudes. I don't say look after the workers. They must be looked after. They must be protected. But you have no business telling others their work. Here, if you want to be tough on the employer. But what business you have got to tell Trump and Mexicans to be tough on their workers? They would not be. They are not going to oblige you. And why should they? Another thing which comes up is that we have got to divest our morality from business. If we are hypocrites enough to send arms to Saudi Arabia and then talk of the gender rights, if we exploit our indigenous people and then ask USA and Mexico to protect the gender rights, then it only shows that we are being hypocrites, that we are double-faced creatures who do one thing and say the other. Politics might be a game of hypocrisy, but trade talks are not. Those people are aware of what we are doing. They will not be taken in or swayed by such talk that is all sound and fury and signifies nothing. Jake. It's a lesson for the political leaders of Canada that by talking in this manner, they are not advancing their interest or the interest of the country. They are only creating more obstacles and impediments. An ultimate loser would be the economy of the country, the business of the country. A country with which you have 87% trade, and you want the trade to continue, then you have no business lecturing that country how to conduct business or how to treat people, especially when you are as guilty as that country may be, or maybe more. So, let's leave our gender rights, our environmental issues, our human rights separately than economic issues and go ahead on the economic issues. Let both parties learn that economies need a certain treaty. The details are not dependent and should not be dependent on the extraneous issues and the moral preaching as is being done by Canadian team headed by Minister Freeland. Thank you.